If we predicted just 6 months ago the race for mayor in Baltimore would be wide open, potentially city-altering event, a few would believe it. But that's exactly where we are now. In the aftermath of the death of Freddie Gray in police custody, everything has appeared to change in a city not known for a dynamic political contest. Out is Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, who last week announced she would not run. In are candidates like Carl Stokes, Catherine Pugh, and former Mayor Sheila Dixon, to name a few. But the bottom line is this: will a seemingly competitive race change anything? And are the candidates willing to offer plans to address the systemic poverty and heavy-handed policing that almost everyone acknowledges brought us to where we are now? To help me answer that question are two journalists who have been closely watching as this story unfolds. Sean Yost is a veteran award-winning journalist who writes a column on race for the Afro-American newspaper and hosts First Edition on WEAA nightly from 5 to 7. Taya Graham is a Real News Network correspondent who focuses on race, incarceration, and women's interactions with policing. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
So I want to start out, and I'll start it with you, Sean, about just how the mayor's withdrawal from the race, which of course was a stunning development for all of us, I think, in the press corps, how that affects the other people who have joined the race thus far. Does it give us a clear front runner?
No. I don't think anything's clear at this point. I think it opens the process up. I think it invites people who may have been on the fence about getting into the race. Maybe they're leaning more towards actually getting in, whereas before they may have been much more trepidatious. Mm-hmm. So I just think it opens the process up. There may be more individuals who decide to get in, and quite frankly, it opens the money up a little bit more. I mean, some of that money that was attached to Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, much of it is going to go elsewhere, right?
Right, when she lost, her connection to Martin Colin Lauer, who was the main fundraiser. So that does mean other people have access to that.
Absolutely.
Well, Taya, you've covered, you've been covering the race. Do you think anybody emerges from this? I mean, does Sheila Dixon have any advantage, or anyone that you see having an advantage now that the mayor is withdrawing?
Honestly, because the mayor withdrew, I think Sheila loses the initial advantage she had. Before, it was going to be a battle of two titans, Stephanie Rawlings-Blake versus Sheila Dixon, old mayor versus new. And now Sheila Dixon's, her notoriety, her name recognition, I don't think has quite as much power, because now people like Catherine Pugh, there's a chance Jill Carter might come into the race, Carl Stokes has come in. There's so many names. There's a possibility Wes Moore might be coming into the race. Connor Meek, a 27-year-old young man, a millennial who had an amazing experience where he went to the police station to talk about his bike being stolen. They didn't help him. Now he's running his own campaign, holding the police department accountable. So there are all these people who are jumping into the race, and I think it could really split the vote.
So, Sean, that raises a great question. Then, how does someone distinguish themselves, out of this field that seems to be growing? I mean, Nick Mosby hasn't said anything yet, but we think he might get it. So, what do you do to put yourself out in front of this in terms of, is it about issues, or is it about just name recognition?
I think I hope it becomes more about issues. Right. I mean, we heard Carl Stokes on my show talk about diverting money from the police department to education. Well, that's a pretty radical position in the context of Baltimore politics.
I've never heard it before.
I haven't either.
I've never heard a politician in Baltimore City run anything but more police, or we need more police. So that's the first time I've heard that.
So I think policy-wise, if people are paying attention, and I don't know if they are at this point yet or not, but if people are paying attention, that's the type of policy position that I think that would kind of place him out by himself, clearly, right?
Yeah. Well, but okay, so I watched Sheila Dixon's video, right? And all she talked about was...
The ice cream social?
Right, well, she did a video, she released a video, and it's pretty just, here I am, I'm here. So, Tay, do you think policing can really become, bolster a candidate to the front? Like, given that Sheila Dixon already is just saying, I'm just Sheila Dixon.
If it was any other year other than this one, I would say her name recognition would be enough. And the simple fact that she's Sheila Dixon and that she's still popular among the people. But in relation to the Freddie Gray's in custody death, in relation to the international spotlight that Baltimore has been in for its police brutality and its police militarization, I think it really does change the conversation so that a policy engaging policing really might gain traction.
So, and that brings a good question. So, we have the Freddie Gray situation. So it's really made Baltimore the epicenter of police dysfunction, right? So does that, with the trials going on, how does that affect the race as it unfolds, you think? Given that we could be going through the entire race with the Freddie Gray trials being adjudicated, how does that affect the race in your opinion, Sean?
Well, now that the mayor has decided not to run for re-election, I mean, at least she's taken, for lack of a better term, off of the hook as far as what
And she's
transpires.
sort of taking the hit in a way.
Right, and that target isn't there anymore, really,
Yeah.
as far as candidates for mayor is concerned. But does it start to fall back on Sheila Dixon? I mean, she's connected directly to zero tolerance policing. She's connected directly to much of the dysfunction that is manifesting itself now.
And
right?
she was mayor when BFL had the famous VSET unit, which was a unit that incurred all those lawsuits that the Sun wrote about, the $5 million in lawsuits.
Right.
So that's a good point. So you think Sheila Dixon can't walk away from that?
Well, I think she's less able to walk away from it than anybody else who's in the race. I mean, Carl Stokes is kind of known as someone who has railed against the way law enforcement had been executed over the years, and this position, his current position on diverting funds from, he's become the antithesis of a FOP candidate, right? So it would seem like Sheila Dixon would be the most likely target now that Stephanie Rawlings-Blake is out of the race.
But let me tell you, with you, let me challenge the idea of policing being, okay, so Martin O'Malley was recently on Democracy Now!, right? And Democracy Now!, they brought up David Simon, who obviously has recently discovered that there was zero tolerance, and gave Martin O'Malley a very hard time for the zero tolerance policy, which if people don't know, the city arrests about 100,000 people a year under Martin O'Malley, and it was very controversial. And Martin O'Malley said, well, you know, it's not true that people in the city didn't like zero tolerance. He said, because everyone voted for me. I won a majority of the vote, you know. So how is policing suddenly become an issue when people 10 years ago voted for what was considered to be one of the worst police policies in the history of this country?
Well, I saw the same clip you did on Democracy Now!, and he said that he had received 88% of the Baltimore city vote. Well, I'm not quite sure where he got his numbers from. When I checked the Baltimore Board of Elections website, I didn't see numbers like that, but perhaps he was referring to the runoff against the Republican candidate. I would say this: if he actually got 20% of Baltimore City residents voting, and let's say 15%
Well, you're talking about the low turnout.
of the low
because
turnout.
it was only 20% turnout.
So it's only 20% turnout. And if the majority of those residents voted for him, we don't really know what the demographic of that group of residents was. I mean, a lot of times in Baltimore, people vote with their feet. And I think that's shown with the Governor Hogan's race against Anthony Brown. He won, and I think that's because people did not show up to vote for Anthony Brown.
So what you're saying is that we don't really know if people really voted for zero tolerance or it was just a low turnout. And that raises a great question because, Sean, you know, we're talking about a different kind of election. They moved the election back from off year, which is 2015, with separate primary, to a primary that will coincide with the Democratic president. How does that change the dynamics of the race in your mind in terms of candidates? Does it help anybody, hurt anybody? Does it change it at all?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Because if someone, because we don't know, first of all, everyone who's going to be in the race.
Yeah.
So is it possible that someone could connect to a national figure and try to ride some sort of wave of, I don't know, that's a great question.
Like for example, someone could join with Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton. But I mean, traditionally we've had really low turnout. You know, like I think Stephanie's last victory in 2011 was 18% of the population. Now you've got, I think, voters who are probably less vested in the process, right? So people who could, maybe that would help an outsider or something.
Well, but then again, I think the larger issue of law enforcement reform is one that connects on a national level as well. So that may be a platform that a national candidate would take up, and it could be a platform that a local mayoral candidate could connect to. I don't know. I don't think, my gut says that it probably won't make much difference.
Interesting.
But there are scenarios that could play out that could make it relevant, maybe.
Yeah, interesting. I tell you, do you think also another big issue that Carl Stokes has raised that we heard is about development downtown, you know, the tax breaks given to developers. Most recently, Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake in 2013 gave a $100 million tax break to Michael Beatty to build Harbor Point. Do you think that issue will raise the level of being a campaign issue, given Carl Stokes has introduced it? Do you see it having any traction?
Well, for example, with Exelon, they're supposed to establish our corporate headquarters here in Baltimore City. They were obligated to, it was contractual, and yet an incredibly generous tip was given to them.
Right.
And Carl Stokes has come out time and time again about these gimmies, essentially giving away taxpayer hard-earned money to these developers who certainly don't need it and use it to gamble on risky projects in Baltimore City. And I think the nation, as well as the world, was shown that Gilmore Homes in Sanchester, Windtown had no benefits from the enterprise zone.
Right.
It benefited the developers, not the citizens of Baltimore.
Well, and
That's
Carl
really
Stokes
interesting. That's interesting.
He was pretty much a lone kind of voice
He was absolutely a lone voice
in that process. I mean,
but that raises an interesting question. So, in this sense, what had once been sort of a nebulous idea, tax break, is wedded to this image. Because let's face it, during the Freddie Gray uprising, we had image after image of that tale of two cities. Yeah. So does that tale of two cities, could someone sort of glom that onto the Bernie Sanders sort of economic populism and make a charge?
Well, sure, because the tale of two cities didn't manifest itself in April of 2015. Tale
Right.
of two cities has been going on since we started developing the Inner Harbor, and maybe even before that. I mean, Baltimore has always been a tale of two cities in one way, shape, or form. I mean, this is a town that invented segregation, literally. So we've always been a tale of two cities.
Yeah, and it could be a campaign issue. Most political experts will tell you that it is African-American women who decide the vote in Baltimore City. It has been, it always will be. Do you see any candidate emerging from because you're a women's studies major, someone who knows this subject. Does that give Sheila Dixon an advantage in this race?
It's possible that it gives Sheila an advantage in that she's familiar, she's recognizable, she's seen as a mother. I do think, though, that there are other people that can appeal to the African-American women's space. I don't think we're monolithic. I think we're more diverse than people think. And I think if we're presented with someone who's truly presenting policies that are going to benefit Baltimore citizens, benefit families, benefit children, I think we'll choose that person.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
And I agree with Ted. The black community is not monolithic in any segment of it, but black women have always identified with Sheila Dixon in Baltimore City. It seemingly all throughout her career, they have supported her tremendously. I think a significant portion of the black women's vote will again support Sheila Dixon. How much I think is the key thing here. But like Taya said, there are others that could enter the race that could have similar appeal, maybe not similar appeal, but appeal to the black women's voting bloc. Someone like Westmore, I've heard people trot out these different thoughts about him being the son of a lot of these women, the grandson of a lot of these women. This young man who born and raised in Baltimore went off to accomplish great things.
Yeah, great story,
right.
Great backstory.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't ignore the young people in Baltimore City. I mean, the way they organized, the way they've turned out to support Freddie Gray's family, to show their concern about their city and the way that it's being policed. I think we can't count our young people out. I think they're really going to step up and make some changes in our electorate.
So that raises a question, who do you think would be their candidate? Anyone off the top of your head?
Wow. Well, first off, I'd have to say Jill Carter, because she has already reached out to the young African-American leadership that's burgeoning in our city. But also there's a chance that an outsider like Connor Meek might appeal as well. I mean, he's a millennial, and he's saying a lot of things that are interesting. I mean, he wants transparency, accountability, communication. He won't accept campaign donations. He says donate it to a nonprofit that needs it. That might appeal to a lot of young people.
Wow. Well, the final question, we're kind of in the age of the Donald Trump candidacy. Is there anybody, a character in this race who might emerge that would have a story? Would it be they'd not be like Donald Trump, but would it be someone like Westmore or someone who emerged who just transcends the politics of it with his character or personality?
I don't know. I mean, we've tried it out we've had a couple of informal polls on First Edition, and Westmore didn't fare very well. And now, obviously, that's a rather small, informal kind of sampling. But he didn't, there is an aversion, you know this, there is an aversion, even though Westmore's from Baltimore, he's still kind of seen as a guy who's not, what high school did you go to? Where did you, I mean, that's a key question for a lot of people, and he may not have the right answer.
It's called like the prime rib factor. The restaurant's been over 40 years, never changed its menu.
Right.
There's a certain amount of you've got to be, and that's interesting because that's what Sheila Dixon's message was. You know me.
That's her. That is her message.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's been a very interesting conversation, Sean and Taya. I both appreciate you coming in and talking to us about this. We will continue to have a conversation about the mayor's race as it unfolds, because I'm sure, if nothing else, it's going to be interesting, right?
Indeed.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you. My name is Stephen Janis. I'm a reporter for the Real News Network in Baltimore.